So let's go ahead and do a quick tour of Autopano Video Pro. Now, the purpose of Autopano Video Pro is very precise, very specific, is to take all the clips that you shot on the different cameras. In this case, we're using a 10 camera rig, synchronize all the clips either using audio or video or both, and then stitch those videos together in order to create the best image possible, or the best panoramic image possible. At that point, you go to Auto Giga. But right now, let's just look at Autopano Video Pro. The first thing that it's good for is to use the synchronization, as I said before, to either use audio or video to synchronize all the clips. This is key, especially if you have movement. You can use audio or video, or you may need to go to a editor like Final Cut or Premiere to do the audio syncing. If audio is so important for your clip, then export those clips independently, bring them back into Autopano Video Pro, and then do the synchronization one more time. Without synchronization, you can't do stitch. Then the next item is stitching. Stitching is what we did before in order to be able to make this panoramic image that you see in front of you. You choose the camera, or you choose a template that you have already created in Autopano Giga, or you choose a lens model, you choose the position where you want to help you stitch, or the selection, meaning in and out points in this section. And at that point you hit stitch. Before we get to stab, color, blend, stereo, and render, let's talk about what you see. Here it is the window that shows you the tab that you're in. In this case, we are in stitch. These are all the clips. And remember when I told you for file management, it would be great if you name the clips to match the cameras that you were using. It's because here you won't get to see any of those things. So it is handy to start learning which camera serves which purpose in your rig, so that when it gets time, the more you do it, when it gets time to produce more and more videos, you understand how to make the most out of your rig. Then here, this is a preview of what we have done. Will show you what the stitch will look like, or as you make changes in Autopano Giga, what those changes are reflected into what will be your panoramic 360 video. Now, this section right here, it is to make refine touch-ups into the video itself. In the case of this tutorial, we are not going to go into much detail into what happens here with horizon and stitch, and all the other settings are indicated here. But the advantage of it is that it allows you to control different issues that may arise after stitching, especially when you are shooting video where the camera is no longer static and you're moving the camera in a particular direction, and that direction will affect how you do your stitching. So this section right here is where you will start dealing with some of those issues in a combination with Autopano Giga. Now, let's go into stab. Stab is a mode that you will use especially when you are using footage where there is movement. For example, if you put the rig on a vehicle, that's a great example for this function, because what it will do is that it will attempt to eliminate any shutter, any vibrations, any issues with stabilization that you may have in the shot, so that your stitching when you're there is more consistent throughout the video and throughout the changes that you are making, and you don't get sudden deviations of your stitching and the shots come out, the puzzles break into little pieces. Color is what it is color settings. What we are going to do for this particular tutorial is that we are going to do this function in Autopano Giga and not in Autopano Video Pro. Blend Again, this is a duplicate setting that you have in Autopano Giga. Blend is how all the cameras, once they are stitched, how all the sections or all the masking of every clip and how it is being used to create the panoramic image, how that blending is together so that you don't get sections that are darker, you don't get little lines that split up between the stitches and so on. Again, we are going to deal with blending in Autopano Giga. And then there is rendering. Rendering is what you do in your final product. Now, for rendering, you have to also deal with this section right here. If you see the red line, rendering interval, and the blue line, current selection. What this means is that what you do to render, if you only wish to render a piece, you just hit input and output as if you were using a video editor. And then at that point you render, but in my case, we are going to render the entire clip. You really don't want to render the entire clip until you are at the end of your finishing processes, ideally, because it takes a long time. So let's go ahead and let's render. The render window is going to give you the size of your video. This is what, with the current settings of each camera, this is what you can get in terms of width. This is what could be considered 5K video. This is the height. Now, it's telling me that the output settings will only allow me to output my 360 video in 4K resolution, and the reason why that is because we are choosing this type of encoding, H.264, for what we are going to do. The preset is ideally the 4K UHD TV. In this case, we are going to maintain the standard as original video because we want to make sure that we are using the amount of frames that were used in the cameras as we were recording and not deviate from that. Video bitrate, you get to choose what video bitrate you want. In this case, we're using 24,000 kilobytes per second, and the audio bitrate 160. You can increase it further. I'm going to just leave it at 360. Video, you can increase it further, and we can go ahead, and it all depends on what you want to achieve, and talk about further about the video bitrate that may work best for your case. The aspect ratio, you want to keep it in pixel size, and the audio source, we are telling it that we want to use camera 1, but again, this is where naming your cameras ahead of time before you're bringing it into Autopano Video comes in handy. If you have a camera that you have selected as your slave camera, the one that is getting feed for audio, then that's the camera that you want to use. In this case, all 10 clips are using exactly the same audio source because they were presynced using DaVinci Resolve before. And then you want to make sure that you are saving this in the right place. I have a folder called render, and I am going to call this where is ELMO 3 and final. And we are ready to apply my settings. Come back, make sure that they have been applied, and render.